and this can go back down here. Sorry, a little out of sorts this morning. Jeez. Yeah, a little out of sorts in general today, I guess. Crazy day in the world of video games, huh? I guess maybe even some would argue the world of business in general, with Microsoft announcing that they are working on acquiring Activision Blizzard for $68.7 billion, which we couldn't really get that extra $0.3 billion in there, Microsoft. The internet's a little mixed about whether this is a good thing or not. If you would have gotten that to $69 billion, people would have just responded nice and rolled with it. It just wasn't really clear thinking on Phil Spencer. You're better than that. That's what I'm going to say. I'm kidding. But what I wanted to kind of do is I want to just take a quick walk through what I think this means for all of the parties involved. Yes, nice, Jim. Nice, exactly. I just wanted to walk through quickly what I think this means for all of the parties involved with the acquisition, as well as then all the other main players that are going to be affected by this throughout the industry. This is all from like things that I've read and just like listening to video game media for as long as I have. I have no inside information in any way, shape, or form. But I don't know. I think there's a lot of things to digest here. I've read a lot of things today, a lot of differing perspectives. I can kind of see all sides. I guess starting off, let's look at like my bias before we jump into this, because I think that's like an important way to take a look at how I'm processing this information, right? I'm primarily a PlayStation gamer, primarily play RPGs, but I do currently own all systems. I have a PS5, a PS4 that I use probably more than my PS5. I have an Xbox Series X. I do have Game Pass, and I have a Nintendo Switch. So currently, I have a gaming PC now too that I've actually played a few games on, which is surprising to me because it's been a long time since I've messed around with gaming on a PC as well. My personal thoughts about Game Pass, and we'll maybe get into that once we get to Game Pass, are that it's amazing right now to play as many games as you can for such a low price, right? But I do worry about what that means for the gaming industry as a whole in the future. Right now it's great because Game Pass is the only thing out there that's doing what it's doing. Down the line, there's going to be competitors. We've already heard about Spartacus, which is the PlayStation competitor that Sony's working on right now. We don't really know what that's going to be yet. I have a guess. We're going to talk about that once we get to the PlayStation part of this discussion. But ultimately, I think I worry about Game Pass because it's great in a vacuum right now. Just like Netflix, when it first started doing streaming video, was great in a vacuum. It was awesome. I didn't have to wait for these discs to come to me in the mail. I don't have to go to the store or order from Amazon and hope that it gets to me on day one. I can just go onto Game Pass on day one and play Halo Infinite. I can play, when it comes out, Starfield, Elder Scrolls 6, any of these other things. Like, if they're on Game Pass day one, I can play them out of the box. Usually, I think you can download them ahead of time, too. It takes a lot of the crap out of buying video games completely out of the equation. However, once you start to get out of that vacuum, and once it's not the only stream, or not, it's not just streaming, but once it's the only game subscription service out there, that's when it's going to be interesting to see how that evolves. As we're seeing now, Netflix, basically on a yearly basis, is raising its rates. Amazon Prime, because it's lumped into this whole shipping deal that Amazon has relatively stayed the same price. Though I don't know that Amazon Prime would be anybody's main streaming service, right? Same thing with, Hulu then. Hulu kind of differentiated itself in that it had a lot more live TV before a lot of the other places do, and it still does, especially compared to Amazon Prime and Netflix. But all of these things have gotten quite a bit more expensive from when they first started to be popularized a few years ago. That's where I see stuff like Game Pass getting down the line. Is it still going to be worth it? Is it still going to be a good deal for gamers? It very well could be. But we'll get into that in a minute. Let's first start with, so what does Microsoft acquiring Activision Blizzard mean for Activision Blizzard? And I think I'm actually going to split this off into two. We'll look at Activision first. For Activision, it's going to be resetting the mess. Whoop. It helps if I could type, probably. Things have been crappy for Activision Blizzard in the last 6 months, 1 year, probably longer than that if you actually work there and you're on the inside and you know that. New leadership taking over everything after a couple of years means that you're going to be able to reset the culture within the organization. Now, there's been some reports that even Microsoft has its issues with misogyny or things like that. Pretty much every large company, I think, in some pockets, are going to have these sorts of issues. That's kind of the problem with these huge companies. Cultures develop within these companies, and those cultures can be hard to change. Having worked for large companies in the past a little bit, or different entities, culture is a huge thing. Now, a culture doesn't necessarily mean it has to be negative, but a culture is hard to change. It takes a long time to change a culture. Having new management over the top of something, even more so than what they were doing with Blizzard by putting Mike Ybarra and Mike Ybarra now in charge, ultimately, that culture is going to be able to be changed a little bit faster when you say, hey, you're Microsoft employees now. This is how Microsoft works. So for Activision, it is going to reset the mess that they have had organizationally for quite some time. That's going to be the same for Blizzard, too. The interesting thing that we're going to see with Activision is what happens with Call of Duty. Call of Duty, by far the biggest game that Activision has. By far the biggest game in video games. And that's been kind of the big question, right? People that play primarily on PlayStation play Call of Duty. Is that actually going to be available for us to play on a PlayStation in the future? My answer is going to be like three-pronged here. For the next few years, nothing changes. Now, obviously, the next year, nothing's going to change because this isn't going to be finalized probably until early next year, I would guess. Fiscal year 2023 starts in July for Microsoft, which means that this is going to then be, or June, I think, for Microsoft, which means this is going to be finalized between June 2022 and June 2023. I would guess probably about this time next year is when it will happen. That's similar to the time frame with Bethesda. The thing that will maybe cause that to take longer is depending on if there is actually a regulatory oversight that happens with it. But my guess is right now Sony tends to have exclusivity with DLC as well as sort of a main marketing push with Call of Duty. If we look at what Microsoft did with Bethesda, and that's going to be a recurring theme here because that was their last major acquisition, and I think we're going to be able to see that this is going to be equitable all the way through. What they did with Bethesda was that they were going to honor any of their agreements that they had before for marketing, exclusivity, and so on, which is why Deathloop is going to be only on PlayStation, I think on PC, for 1 year. And then eventually, then it's going to be on Game Pass, on Xbox, so on and so forth. Same thing with Ghostwire Tokyo when that comes out. However long that agreement is between PlayStation/Sony and Activision for Call of Duty, that is going to stay the same. If they locked it up for the next 3 years, if they locked it up through the PlayStation 5, the game is going to remain on PlayStation systems as long as that DLC agreement is there. I'm guessing 1 to 4 years. I highly doubt they locked it up through the entire console cycle. So I would say probably it was like a 5-year contract starting with this year, 1 to 4 more years of that. Once the contract is up, buy main COD on PS. Call of Duty campaign, which some people would argue, well, I don't know, they've been waffling between even having a campaign or not. And Call of Duty multiplayer, once that contract is up, I'm going to guess that Microsoft is going to say, hey, remember that number you had before? Double it, and we'll keep this going. We'll keep this agreement if you double however much you're paying. So say that they're paying like $70 million now. That's probably not even right. $150 million now. Microsoft say, hey, $300 million. You'll keep the exclusivity. You'll get DLC ahead of when it comes on Xbox. The exclusivity will also count. It won't go on Game Pass until after that month passes that it's going to be exclusive on Sony. But then it's going to come to Game Pass and it's going to be on there and so on and so forth. If they don't want to pony up double the money, which that's probably going to be actually a big decision that Sony would have to make, I am going to guess that Call of Duty campaign and multiplayer is then going to be PC and then Xbox ecosystem exclusive. What will remain is Warzone will be multi-platform. That is the hub that they want everybody to be able to play. It's free to play. That's easy to have everywhere. That's something that will be, I think, viewed like Minecraft, is that it should be everywhere. But if we're looking at Bethesda, if they said they didn't pay $7.5 billion to not have it be exclusive to Xbox, they did not pay almost $69 billion to not have Call of Duty be exclusive to Xbox. Unless they're going to be getting lots of cash per year for marketing from Sony in order to have it, they didn't pay this money to like, okay, you guys can keep Call of Duty just like us. We're going to have it on Game Pass day one. And maybe that's the only thing that I could see, is if they think from a financial standpoint, having it on Game Pass day one mitigates then the losses that they have of those sales going to Sony. Now, logically, I would actually look at it and say, you should just sell it for $50, or for $60, $70, $70 since it's on PS5. Sell it for $75 or $70 on Sony. If people have an Xbox and Game Pass, hey, they get it as a part of their subscription. Good, great, grand, wonderful. Have a great time. I could see that being the case too, but it's not the same size, because Call of Duty is the largest game, the highest selling game every year overall. We'll find out. NPDs come out tomorrow. Matt Piscatella put out a tweet. NPDs for the year 2021 come out tomorrow. I would be shocked. Call of Duty will be in the top 5. I will be shocked if it's not number 1, because Call of Duty is always number 1 for sales. Maybe that then counts as big enough. But Skyrim, which was known, Elder Scrolls was known for being on every platform under the sun. It was on the Amazon Alexa, for crying out loud. If they're going to take that and not put it on Sony platforms anymore, I mean, Call of Duty isn't a sacred cow in that sense, right? I mean, it was all the memes and everything were about Skyrim was available on everything. But now Elder Scrolls 6 is not going to be. So I could see a time frame where Call of Duty isn't available everywhere. I see that being the case. Now, what does it mean for like Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, a lot of those other smaller, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, for crying out loud? I could almost assure you, all other Activision games will be Xbox, PC exclusive. No doubts about it. Maybe they throw Sony a bone and say, hey, you want Crash Bandicoot on there? You have a history with Crash Bandicoot. We'll let this happen. I doubt it. It's the same line Phil Spencer said. This is, and I'm not trying to knock Phil Spencer. He's doing what he needs to do for his company to be successful. But if he said that they didn't spend all that money on Bethesda to put those games on, to not make them exclusive or not to have a benefit from it, they're not going to do that with all these other Activision Blizzard, properties. They're just not. That's just not how they're going to operate with this. So that's how I see things rocking out for Activision. Blizzard. I think actually Blizzard is going to reap a lot more from this than Activision will. Blizzard has been having a rough go of things recently. They took the majority of the negative press, which rightfully so, because a lot of the investigations from the state of California were against Blizzard itself, specifically, not just Activision Blizzard. The leadership there was a problem when Mike Morhaime was there. So ultimately, this is going to be that hard reset that they kind of needed. It's like, now, hey, this is a new thing. It's funny. Somebody had posted on Facebook that Mike Ybarra, who used to be like an infrastructure dude at Xbox before he took a job at Blizzard, and then ended up being now the president of Blizzard, or CEO, whichever one they call it. He was the inside man to get this deal done, because now he is in charge of Blizzard as they're being acquired by Microsoft. That just means it's going to be probably an extremely smooth transition into the Microsoft working culture. Whether that's better or worse than what it is to be at Blizzard, I don't know. I have no idea. I have no understanding of what the working status is within any of Microsoft studios. A lot of what they have said is that those studios are able to maintain a lot of their own identity. But in this case, where Blizzard kind of needs a little bit of a reboot, they need help getting games out the door because Overwatch 2 and Diablo 4 have been delayed and delayed and delayed, and WoW has been just hammered by people. And Warcraft itself, Warcraft 3 Reforged was a flop, and long-term fans hated it. Microsoft is going to be able to give them marketing around those games even bigger than what Blizzard could do. And really for Microsoft, these are like PC-centric games that they are going to use to bolster the PC side of Game Pass. Like 1,000%. That is going to be huge for Microsoft, because that was kind of a hole they had. Like Age of Empires 3 was their largest Microsoft-developed PC game. I mean, we could talk Flight Simulator too, because that is also a PC game, but that's very niche, Age of Empires is much more well-known across gamers. But ultimately, I really think that Blizzard is going to really benefit from this. They'll be able to get help from whatever development studios that Microsoft uses to help support developers at key times to try to get these projects that they've been working on for a while in Overwatch 2 and Diablo 4 and World of Warcraft, whatever that next expansion might be, out the door. So I think for Blizzard, this will lead to a renaissance of the brand. They're going to help. Microsoft will definitely help them bring back the good name of Blizzard. Jim, you shared a tweet here. Let's bring this up here. It didn't open in the right window, so it's not going to come up on the screen. But I'll see if I can get it over there. Oh, maybe I'm not. And it doesn't look like it's loading either for me right now, unfortunately. Gotta love technology. Hi, Titan. How's it going today? So, yeah, I think this is going to lead to a renaissance of the brand Blizzard. It'll be able to separate itself from the name Activision now, which is probably good for Blizzard because a lot of long-term Blizzard fans think that things went downhill or view that things went downhill when they merged with Activision. So it's going to lead to a renaissance of that. Expanded development resources for finishing Overwatch 2 and Diablo 4. Now, was relevant during my streaming Game Pass rant. I'll see if I can bring it up again. Well, we'll be talking about Game Pass here. They should bundle all the streaming services together and call it cable. Yes, that is exactly it. Well, and really, to that point, Jim, and Jim Gaffigan, too. To that point, at some point here, it's going to happen that these streaming services are going to be more expensive than cable, possibly. It like could get to that point in this just weird sort of Inception, oddly everything going backwards sort of situation, right? So we shall see. Hopefully, this will also lead to a better work culture for Blizzard. Can't believe that they almost bought them out. They bought them out for almost $70 billion. Yeah, that's just crazy money, right? $7.5 billion was like an absurd amount of money for Bethesda, and let's just take that almost times 10, and that's how much they're spending. It is funny money, right? So what does this mean for Microsoft? So quite clearly now, it means they are the third largest video game publisher now. And that is behind Tencent and PlayStation. PlayStation still, from a revenue standpoint, is if you add an Activision Blizzard to Microsoft, PlayStation's still ahead of them. Tencent is leaps and bounds ahead of all of them, mostly because of League of Legends and also because they have their fingers in a zillion pies. And Titan, you were about to say you're worried about increase in price now that the competition is thinned. That's going to be something we'll talk about when we get to Game Pass here in a moment. For Microsoft, they now have equal amount of first-party studios compared to PlayStation. So they now are... Microsoft Studios now has about the same amount of developers, if not more now, actually, development studios, when compared to PlayStation. And so I think what this means is, Microsoft has definitely put a lot of money into this. Now, how they sold it from the business standpoint was telling them basically this is their play for the metaverse, which means nothing, I think, to most people, and is still kind of like ages away from actually turning into something like Ready Player One, right? But investors are looking at that as the next big wave in technology. And so if Microsoft can say this is their big play to get in that direction, that's how they sell this to shareholders, to say that this $68.7 billion is worth it. So I think that is going to be the big thing for Microsoft. Otherwise, other than the fact that Phil Spencer now has more things underneath his plate, and a more developed structure around him, for Microsoft, this is just going to be business as usual. This is adding this all into their original plan, which was Game Pass first. Still the best deal in gaming. They're going to continue to say that. Or it's now an even better, even the bester deal in gaming. They'll say something like that. They're going to really, once they can start wrapping the Activision Blizzard games into Game Pass, this is going to be a big deal. PC Game Pass is no longer an afterthought. So I truly think that PC Game Pass is no longer going to be an afterthought. In fact, my guess for Game Pass is that now we have World of Warcraft will be included with a new tier of Game Pass. So there will be the bester, yes, the bester one. They will World of Warcraft. That's going to be huge for them. If they had a dwindling player base before, let's get a lot of people that didn't want to pay a subscription price before to jump in. Now, this is going to be a tier that's going to have a different price. Now, somehow they're going to work this into, it's going to be Ultimate with WoW or something like that. They're not going to have anything. I don't know what you could even come up with. Extreme, would that be higher than Ultimate? But ultimately, World of Warcraft is going to get lumped in somewhere. I think it's going to be a third tier. So you would have your Game Pass console, $10 a month. PC, $5 a month. It's probably going to be something like another $5 a month or $10 a month on top of that, and you will get Game Pass with WoW. There's probably going to be some other benefits lumped into there in order to make it not seem like you're just paying a WoW subscription along with your Game Pass subscription. But there's going to be another tier worked into there that WoW is going to nestle into, so that people that aren't interested in playing it, maybe they'll be enticed by it with some of the other things that are included in that tier. There's going to be something else that's going to be in there, though, in order to make that meet out. It's still going to be cheaper than the current state where you'd have to pay a WoW subscription each month and a Game Pass subscription each month. It's going to be cheaper than what that total price would be. But it is going to increase in price from that standpoint. But yeah, Game Pass is going to continue to get, for the time being, lots and lots of positive press. Because now it's just going to have more and more games added day one, as soon as they're developed, are going to be available on there. Once they are able to, Call of Duty is going to be lumped into there. And, maybe it's not even that it's exclusive to Game Pass, but it could just be if you have Game Pass, you can play multiplayer a week early for Call of Duty, or something like that. Or if you have Game Pass, you get access to the beta down the line. Now, World of Warcraft being on Game Pass will mean an infusion of a player base, of a fresh player base to World of Warcraft. People that have been sitting on the fence thinking about, oh yeah, I played that game 10 years ago and it was fun, they're now going to get the chance to jump into either Classic or current WoW, jump in and play it for the first time in a long time. And I think it's going to be one of those things where it's going to lead to a lot of positivity within WoW. This will probably also lead to a console version of World of Warcraft. Apparently, Blizzard had been multiple times in the past messing around with trying to make a console version of that. I would believe that Microsoft would, either within Blizzard or teaming up with one of their other developers, lump some developers together in order to help them to develop a console version for World of Warcraft. So then at that point, it can compete with what is now the number one MMO, and from the mind share of people and the current amount of players anyway in Final Fantasy XIV. So I do foresee that being something that happens, which, again, all positives for Blizzard. Now, where I would see possibly a negative with that is I could foresee, because of developing the console version and probably wanting that to drop with the next expansion, I could foresee patches and next expansion being delayed, possibly by a year. Now, this isn't coming from any sort of insider knowledge, but I could see them wanting the console version to launch with the next expansion. And if that takes more time to develop, if Blizzard hasn't been working on that currently, I could see that maybe affecting, maybe not the next expansion, because the next expansion might already be released prior to this deal going through. But in the future, when they are working on trying to tie that console version into there, I could see that possibly creating some issues with that. Like I said, this is just no inside knowledge. This is just my speculation, thoughts on where I think I see things going here. Now, long term for Game Pass, we are going to see competition test the limits of the economics of Game Pass. Will Game Pass continue to remain the best deal in games as one or two or more competitors develop within the ecosystem? Now, what does competition do? Competition is going to push it on price. It could drive the price down a little bit if Spartacus, which is supposedly Sony's streaming option, if that ends up having a cheaper price tag, it could actually push or pull Game Pass down, or continue them to push the sales of Game Pass more and more and more for a little bit longer than maybe Microsoft was planning. Now, if that happens, where does the negative impact of this come from? If financially, economically, at a macroeconomic level, the economy of the world stays kind of in its pattern right now of moderate growth, and we don't have some big inflationary scare or pullback or recession, it's probably going to be A-okay. They could handle that. But if the economy starts to dwindle a little bit and inflation becomes a real significant problem, which a lot of investors are worried about right now, that is going to make for some interesting decisions within Microsoft. The big thing that people are saying about Microsoft is that they're in a really good position from a gaming standpoint because they can soak up any losses of finances from the gaming division, if it would possibly happen, throughout the rest of this large, economic organism that is all of Microsoft. But if all of Microsoft is being strained, it could mean that the gaming division is the financial leader for it, kind of like how PlayStation is one of the huge financial pushes for Sony as a corporation. But if Microsoft financially is pushed a little bit and they're not making as much off of Game Pass, that could mean that projects with the different developers that have either been purchased or were already existing Microsoft studios could start to get squished a little bit. Smaller projects might be postponed to put smaller development studios as support studios for these larger titles that are bigger budget. So if economics go sour, smaller devs get soaked or get put on larger projects. So this is where you could see something happen where, I know you're in the early stages, Double Fine, of developing, you're in the early stages of developing Psychonauts 3 or Psychonauts VR 2 or whatever it might be. We're going to put that on the back burner because we have this big content push for the next step of Halo Infinite, and we really just need coding resources on this. We'll get back to it. And then it's like, oh, well, Gears of War 6. Gears 6. Gosh, we really need some help on this. So let's pull some of these developers from this project over to this for now. If financial resources start to get tight, and it's all underneath this one umbrella, there's the possibility that people could be tapped to work on different things or pulled away from different projects that they really wanted to work on to do these things. From reading different books, like either... especially more recently, I've been reading Press Reset by Jason Schreier, and just seeing lots of other things about what happens at some of these larger publishers. That type of stuff does happen a lot. And that's one of the things that you have to worry about as a smaller developer, or a smaller... it's hard to call developers within Activision Blizzard as smaller developers. But once they're getting absorbed into... the larger Microsoft behemoth, that is something that could possibly happen. So also, there's going to be... competition is also going to take games away from Game Pass. If, for some reason, like Ubisoft, say, creates their own streaming option, that ultimately means that they're probably going to have their own option, and they won't have that stuff on Game Pass. Now, are there a huge glut of Ubisoft games on Game Pass right now? Not really. Recently, Ubisoft has been saying that they're going to have their premium service, which is a little bit different than Game Pass, but very much like EA Play, available on Xbox, as well as PlayStation, and so on and so forth. But what if the economics push them to then make a competitor for Game Pass instead? That means that Ubisoft games will never be on there. And if EA does something similar and they pull EA Play out from within Game Pass at some point, that's a large bunch of games that aren't existent there. Now, if you look at it, buying Activision Blizzard means you're going to have more ammo to fill Game Pass with. But eventually, if the subscription base starts to wane, and they need to make up some of that money, that means then there could be a price increase to handle development costs. Since they're not... I mean, they are selling games that appear on Game Pass still, obviously, and Microsoft is too. And they still do sell copies of their games. They say they're surprised, actually, with how much I think those games sell. But if these streaming things become more readily available and someone's paying $15 a month for Game Pass and $10 a month for Spartacus and then $5 a month for EA Play because they have a FIFA and Madden addiction, that stuff's going to start to add up, and they're not going to buy some of these other games. If they're available on Game Pass, they won't buy them at all. You're also going to see people taking a break from Game Pass. Let their subscription lapse until there's games on there that they want to play. Right now, I think people are just locking themselves in for years upon years upon years and not worrying about it. But at some point, you're not going to be able to get Game Pass Ultimate for $1 a month on top of an Xbox Live exploit. Eventually, that's going to stop. And when that stops, are there going to be as many subscribers anymore? That's the question. All right. Now, this is when we get to the other big question. What does this mean for PlayStation? I'm sure this was said in multiple places within PlayStation today. Oh, shit. This is all going to come down to Spartacus. If you're not familiar, and I've said it a few times already today, Spartacus is supposedly the PlayStation competitor for Game Pass. I'm sure it's going to have some sort of a name. Apparently, it's getting close to being announced, I'm guessing. There's been steam around a February announcement, a big PlayStation February announcement. So that's a possibility. They have apparently pulled the majority of PlayStation Now or PlayStation Plus cards that you can purchase off of the shelves. So Spartacus will probably end up wrapping up into EA or into PlayStation Plus somehow. So it's probably going to be this massive restructure of how you pay to play things on PlayStation. What do I think Spartacus is going to be? I'm lumping this in with what my predictions were before, as well as another thought that I've had more recently that I think is going to make sense. So previously, I've always said it's going to include PlayStation Plus. It's going to include the ability to play some PlayStation Studios exclusives day one. The large PS exclusives. So this is like talking about the next Horizon. This is talking about the next God of War. Some of those you will probably not be able to play after 6-month purchase window. I don't think that Sony is still in the business of pushing units. I don't foresee them getting away from that completely. But some of the PlayStation 2 Studios games that'll probably be on there day one, MLB The Show. Stuff like Returnal from Housemarque. I could see that being a game like that in the future would be day one on Spartacus, right? The other things, what's going to set it apart from what Microsoft currently offers with Game Pass, and why I don't think there's going to be a game word in the PlayStation Spartacus service at all. This is going to include Funimation / Crunchyroll. I don't remember which one of those they're keeping and which one is going away. I think they have both of them right now. And it's also going to include Sony Pictures content. I would bet you $100 that Spartacus is going to include a subscription to the Funimation / Crunchyroll anime streaming service. It's also going to include Sony Television and Sony movie content. Maybe not Spider-Man, because that's probably tied up with Disney Plus types of things. I'm not sure how that's all going to work. But that is something that I have always thought, because Sony had purchased Funimation and Crunchyroll, that would be something that would be included in that. Now, the other thing that I've been thinking about more recently, if it needs to be a competitor, especially now that Blizzard is a part of the, possibly down the line, the Game Pass stable. And because Sony PlayStation has a very good working relationship with them, Spartacus is also going to include Epic Game Store PC subscription connection. That's a weird way to say it, but basically they're going to tap into the Epic Game Store to be their PC Game Pass in some way, shape, or form. Because they have been working a lot with Epic. Most of their games, when they've been released on PC, have been Epic Game Store exclusives. Also, they did a lot together with the launch of Unreal Engine 5, right? Was the most recent iteration of that, or is the current iteration that's coming out now? I foresee there being some big announcement of Epic being wrapped into this ecosystem in some way as well. Which also means, hey, maybe if you have Spartacus, you get the Fortnite Battle Pass for half off. You get exclusive content for Rocket League. You get exclusive content for Fall Guys. All of these things that Epic has been purchasing recently, you get integrated into that. So that's what I see Spartacus being. And all of that then is going to be something, a cost, that's going to end up probably being a little bit more than what Game Pass is. I am going to guess that price is going to be $20 per month for all of this. And there will probably be a cheaper version that will be equitable to what Game Pass is. There will probably be a $10 version that's just the console plus Funimation, Crunchyroll, Sony Pictures, and so on and so forth. And that's still going to have like the Fortnite connectivity, all of that stuff that comes with working with Epic. Now this is, like I said, all of this. I do like Sony purchasing Crunchyroll and Funimation 100% happened. That being part of Spartacus, I have not seen that rumored anywhere. This is just my prognostication of what that's going to be. Take your money, Titan, you're in on that. I would watch a lot more anime then too if that were the case. I used to watch Crunchyroll. I started watching Crunchyroll a decent amount. I watched a lot of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure on there actually, and I got turned off from it mostly because the ads that they played were always the same ad. Over and over. It was like 2 total ads that were just on loop, and I could not stand that after a while. But if I get an ad-free version included in my PlayStation Spartacus, I'm fine with that. So yes, maybe there's some other weird movie tie-in too. One thing that would be super interesting is if, and this is pie in the sky. This is like, I would love it if this were the case, but if they had some sort of integration with like the Criterion Collection, because they don't have a streaming option right now too. If like the Criterion Collection was included, because they have a lot of like, like older Japanese movies within the Criterion Collection. A lot of Akira Kurosawa's movies are a part of that. Now, granted, some of that stuff's on HBO Max and so on and so forth and blah, blah, blah. But I think that would be super interesting if something like that was included in there as well. But I could totally see it being $20 to $25 a month. You get a little bit of a deal if you buy it on a yearly subscription. But I think that is what I see Spartacus being. Aside from that, I also see Sony purchasing more dev studios. What I do not see, and what so many people have been saying recently, Sony will not buy Square Enix. I truly don't think it is in Square Enix's best interest to be purchased by Sony, Microsoft, anybody. The money sounds good, but I actually think, and this is not to like look down on Square Enix. I mean, I'm a huge Final Fantasy fan. I love like a lot of the Square games that I've played throughout my entire life. If you had to I'm probably more of a Square Enix fan, than I am a PlayStation or Xbox or whatever else fan. I honestly think that they value Final Fantasy and their IPs higher than what the purchase price was for Activision Blizzard. Now, that doesn't mean that they would actually sell for that much, because I don't think they would. But I seriously think that they view themselves as being like a bigger than that. I truly don't think that it makes sense for them to be purchased. I also truly don't think it makes sense for Sony to buy large publishers like that. Sony does not have the money that Microsoft has. PlayStation, if you look at it from a percentage, makes so much more for Sony than what Microsoft Gaming, even with Activision Blizzard, from a percentage standpoint, makes for Microsoft. And I think Sony wants to keep it that way. They don't want that part of the company either to completely dwarf the rest of the corporation. So I honestly don't foresee them buying Ubisoft. Don't foresee them buying Square Enix. Don't foresee them buying Bandai Namco. Any of those other large developers. I just don't see that happening, and I actually don't want that to happen. I could see them purchasing a lot more of those mid-tier development studios. Something that rivals like Double Fine. I highly doubt Supergiant would ever be purchased. But something like that. Something that is like a well-respected studio, indie developer that's a little bit larger. I could see that being the case. I could see them also maybe spinning up new development studios to work on IP that they already own. Or having more of a collaborative effort with other companies, like they have with Square Enix, to bring back series that they had before. So that's what I see out of Sony, a lot more than them actually buying something like Square Enix. I don't see that happening. I don't see Square selling that way. Square, I think, really likes its autonomy, and I think they're better off for it, because then they can really be the guardian of their IPs. They really care about their IPs. And I don't think that they want to just have that be worked into that ecosystem in that way. There will still be probably a lot of the exclusivity. Apparently Sony, a lot of the reports have been buying up the exclusivity for the PS5 generation for Final Fantasy games, like the mainline Final Fantasy games. So FF14, FF16, if there's a FF17 in development, they're like locking that in. And then some of the side stuff like Stranger of Paradise is still going to be on everything. I think that's smart. I think that makes sense. I really would like 7 Remake to be available on Microsoft systems sooner rather than later. I think it's fine. It's part of the business that you have like a year of exclusivity or something like that. I would like a lot of those things to become more ubiquitous. I think that's better for Square Enix in the long run, to get more people playing Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 1. But Sony definitely sees value in that and is paying for that. So that is sort of what I see for PlayStation. For Nintendo, more of the same, stay the course. I don't think Nintendo is worried about this. Yeah, exactly, Brasden. Yep. Nintendo's gonna Nintendo. Nintendo has shown, and I owned the Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64. I was a huge Nintendo fan. And then when the PlayStation came out, I kind of switched. I owned a GameCube for 2 weeks, never opened it, took it back, because I decided I probably wouldn't play Animal Crossing every day the rest of my life, and I don't have the money to own a GameCube. So I'll just keep I'll keep borrowing or lending. No, borrowing, yeah, that's the word. Borrowing the GameCube from my friend for a while until I get sick of Animal Crossing. It paid off. It turned out I was right. And then I didn't own a Nintendo console until I bought a Switch. But Nintendo has proven that they are perfectly fine with living as a supplemental ecosystem to these big tier, big box. Like, these guys are going for the bells and whistles. Nintendo is going for the bread and butter. What is it that you really want to play? You don't give a crap if it's all shiny, if it's super HD, 4K, ray tracing. Like, you just want a Mario, you just want a Zelda, you just want to do Smash, you just want to play Mario Kart. We don't need to have this look like it's jaw-dropping. Accessible and fun, exactly, Brasden. They are perfectly fine with you buying a Switch to go with your Xbox or PlayStation. And frankly, I mean, they're like doing completely well right now with that. Now, eventually, is that going to hurt them? As fan expectations continue to push them towards a Switch Pro, and those fans continue to get disappointed, are they eventually going to have to do something about that? Possibly. What they are much more worried about, I think, and I think what they will become increasingly more worried about now that Microsoft might own Activision and Blizzard, is Valve. If it works out, the Steam Deck could become the true competitor for the Switch. I mean, I don't want to Switch Pro. I think that's dumb. Like, the Switch should be able to run things at a stable frame rate and not look like it's from like 2 decades ago. Baby smell. But there's lots of people that wanted a 4K Switch. And we're really... Yes, I agree with you, Baby Smell. I don't want to rebuy a fucking console once I buy it. Titan, you want a Steam Deck? Yes. So, the Steam Deck now, I think, could become the true competitor for the Switch. Let's look at it this way. The Switch was big because of it had the Nintendo exclusive games. Steam Deck's not going to have that. But it also became an indie gaming machine. Indie gaming exploded on the Switch for Nintendo. With the Wii U, I mean, it was way too expensive and it didn't pay off for developers to port their stuff to Wii U, so it just didn't happen that often. The Switch was another value stream for them, which is awesome. I mean, that's great. Because the Steam Deck is going to be tied to Steam, and all indies are on Steam. Like, almost every single indie exists on Steam. That is going to mean, hey, I can have my games that I bought on Steam sale, and I can play them handheld wherever I go for about the same battery life as what I get with my Switch. 2 to 7 hours is what they say, depending upon the game. My Switch lasts maybe 4 hours. Playing Picross, if that. And so it's going to have a comparable there. Going to have better graphics, though for like a Nintendo person, that's not going to matter. But the biggest thing here is the ability to, on the Steam Deck, you can install anything that you can install on a computer. Which means I could be playing, if it's on Game Pass, I could be playing Diablo 4 on my Steam Deck. I could have access, if I can install Game Pass on my Steam Deck, I could be playing anything Microsoft like it was on a Switch. Only it's going to be faster, and it's going to be a higher graphic fidelity. So I see the Steam Deck from like a gamer perspective being the true competitor to the Switch. And it's interesting, I'm pretty behind on podcasts. I've been listening to the talk around the launch of the Steam Deck. And Phil Spencer was one of the people that was saying about how interesting that would be for the video game ecosystem to have the Steam Deck. And because you could put Game Pass on there, he sees that as probably an avenue for people to be able to play his games on there. And that being possibly an extension of the Xbox ecosystem. Another person who you wouldn't think would be patting the back of Valve is Tim Sweeney from Epic. Was talking about how great it is that anything can be installed on there. So you could install the Epic Game Store on the Steam Deck and play your Epic Game Store games on a Steam Deck. And so that shows you then what Valve, I think, is trying to capitalize on. Because they said their competition isn't actually Nintendo. It isn't the Switch. Their competition is gaming laptops. If I can buy a Steam Deck for half the price of a gaming laptop and get the same utility, that's a no-brainer then. If I want to play something that I don't want to play right here in this 3-foot rectangle of space, and I want to take it somewhere else, I could do that with a Steam Deck. I've been this close recently to buying a Steam Deck, and I might at some point. I really want to get my hands on it first. Brasden, handheld MMO access could be fun for a new age of LAN parties. No, exactly! You don't have to lug your tower somewhere. You just have to be able to plug it in because it's going to die pretty fast. But yeah, like that could be really interesting. The Steam Deck is a really neat experiment. I am so curious as to what is going to happen with that. That is something that I think this acquisition could actually be a benefit for that. Because as people see more value in PC Game Pass and see more games on there, that could just be something where, hey, I'm not going to buy a gaming laptop, I'm going to buy a Steam Deck. So it could lead to more sales of that if there is more stuff on a computer that they'd want to do on the go. The industry in general, and I've actually gone longer than I was expecting to go on this, so I'm going to make this kind of short. Ultimately, I'm worried about what all of this means. I'll get my my title that I'm going to copy in here once we're done off the screen. But I am worried what this means for the industry as a whole. I was already, like I said before, I was already concerned about what Game Pass and then multiple game subscription services being out there would end up meaning for developers in the long run. Right now, developers are making really good money with Game Pass. Microsoft is paying them really well to have their games on Game Pass. It's giving them an infusion to finish things. It's been a boon for a lot of developers that have had games on Game Pass. It has led to more sales elsewhere if their game is on Game Pass. If there are more subscription services out there, that means A, the benefits of being on one service is going to decrease because it's not as ubiquitous anymore. And it also means that if there's more subscription services out there, there's probably less of a chance that people will buy your game. Unless people get sick of subscription services and all they do is revert back to buying games. So I think that's where I see there being a negative here. And then when we're looking at the so-called consolidation of the video game industry, with like the buying spree that Microsoft and Sony and all of these organizations have been on, I also see that as a negative, because when you become part of a larger corporation, your autonomy only lasts as long as that's good for the corporation's bottom line. If eventually the bottom line starts to go away from the corporation, they're going to start to make cuts. Some of these developers that have existed for a long, long time could be cut down to nothing. Games that people are interested in having might not happen anymore, like Tango Gameworks. Their stuff is very niche. There is the possibility that in the long run, survival horror games that aren't Resident Evil don't make as much money as they used to. So we're not going to put as much development power into that. We're going to cut your development studio in half, so that we can put these resources elsewhere on these games as a service that are going to last longer and bring in more money over a longer period of time. Like, that is the concern I have if a corporation owns so many of these different developers. How does the Steam Deck work with storage for games? Because you can play PC games, right? Is it going to be streamed? I believe similar to how you already can sort of stream, I think it's called Steam Link, games from your PC onto another device. You can do that. Otherwise, it has either 64, 256, or 512 gigabytes of storage. And then I think it also has expansion slots where you could put in more SSD storage into there. But like we're seeing with a lot of these other things, it's going to be much more expensive. Brasden, Ayuden Chronicle is a good example of hope after that. But you're right. Yes. So that's the thing I'm concerned with. I'm really worried that Game Pass is a great deal now. Sort of like Netflix originally was a great deal, but now it's like over double the price it originally was, and you don't get anything more. In fact, you get less, because granted there's more Netflix original content on there, but you don't have a lot of things. And so then, right now, the price of Game Pass a year, a lot of people say, is the cost of 3 games. But if you feel like you need to get another subscription service, that's the cost of 6 games then, or 7 games a year. At that point, are you really benefiting? Sort of like how long is it going to be where you are not benefiting from switching from cable and cutting the cord, so to speak, to streaming? When you get YouTube TV and it's like, oh, wait, half the things that were on here aren't on here now for a while because we have a contract dispute, which, shock horror, used to happen on cable. Like, we've made all of these, like, evolutions to get back to the same problem, just with a different company. That's what I worry about with these game subscription services. Now, what people will say that wouldn't be all necessarily doom and gloom is that, well, if you don't want a game streaming service, you can just buy the games. And that's true. But I'm also worried that people aren't going to buy games at full price much more anymore because they'll wait for it to go to a subscription service or wait for a sale. And then at that point, how does that cheapen the worth of a game? You already hear it now that so many people are like, oh, well, I'll play that if it's on Game Pass. I'm not going to pay $60 for that. I'm gonna wait until it's X amount. Games are more expensive to make than they've ever been. And tomorrow, games are going to be more expensive to make than they were today. The day after that, they're going to be more expensive to make than they are tomorrow. The nature of the business is that. Now, like, indie games are different and so on and so forth. And I think as consumers, we were babied for a long time in that games were always $60. Games were $60. They were never more than that. And now that some of them are $70, it's just like, whoa, that's way too much money. But when you look at it, I personally would much rather pay $70 for a game than $60 and feel like I need to buy DLC to get a complete experience. Now, the argument against that is, well, a lot of the $70 games you still have to buy DLC to get the complete experience. But I think I really wish that we could find a healthier situation for the industry. Microtransactions, I don't think, are a bad thing per se. If done right, it allows people, it's kind of like tipping. If you like a game, you can tip and buy more of it to show them that you like it. Sort of like Final Fantasy XIV. I play the game a lot. I have bought an extra retainer, which costs me, what? I don't even know. It's quite a bit more per, subscription renewal, to have that extra retainer. But I see the value of it, and I like the game, and I'm happy to pay that amount extra because I'm happy with the experience I'm having. I don't think that that's a bad place to be at with games. When you feel like you have to buy something in order to have a complete experience, that's where I get worried about games, and the future of games. And also when I have to worry about whether it's going to be on X, Y, or Z in order for me to be able to, if I have to worry about it, oh, it's coming off of this streaming service on this day, but it's going to be on this one on this day. I just don't want to have a headache about where I could get access to the games. And so that's kind of my perspective on it and my worries for the industry. In that it's a boom right now, just like the gold rush was. But how long does that stay a boom and eventually it becomes a bust? And eventually it actually becomes worse than what it was, you know? Baby Smell, you don't want to get too political, but this is a real-life example that contradicts the notion that capitalism breeds innovation when corporations don't want to try new things that won't produce favorable enough results. You're not a communist, but you definitely think capitalism needs a very short leash or it goes out of control. No, I mean, I'll agree with you 1,000% on that, Baby Smell. Because in capitalism, the bottom line comes before everything else. Profit comes before everything else. And, like, as a company, maybe that's not a bad mentality to have. I think, from a company perspective. This is coming from somebody that, I mean, I've owned, air quotes, one failed company that me and a friend made when we were like just out of high school, trying to sell random things on the internet that lasted all of 6 months and failed miserably. So that's my business experience other than working for companies. But ultimately, I really think that it is in a company's best interest to treat its employees as good as it possibly can, because they are your most important asset. There's a lot of the mentality, I think, right now in the United States, in capitalism, right? That a company ultimately is looking out for the best interests of its employees. I think it's gotten away from that a lot. I don't necessarily think that is... Companies like to say that a lot, that their employees are their number one asset, their number one concern. But I don't think they make decisions that way. I think most large companies make decisions as to what is the benefit of their bottom line and the benefit of their shareholders, because those are the people that they have to face day in and day out to show them that they're doing things correctly. And then the people that work underneath them will kind of just continue to churn out the bits and baubles and whatsits and widgets that they need to in order to complete things. And I don't necessarily think that that's the best way. Silicon Valley, I think, had its benefits in that it was trying to treat its employees with as many perks as possible. I think we've also seen the dark side of Silicon Valley now, too. So, what is the perfect system? We'll, never find a perfect system, I'm sure. But I think there needs to be a lot more... I think there does need to be more safety nets for the middle class, the average person. Baby Smell, we used to do antitrust stuff in this country, but corporations and governments are now seen completely intertwined now. I mean... There's a lot of truth to that. And, I mean, for a long time, there was not a lot of oversight over things. I'd highly recommend, it's Hogue Law. Let's go underneath here. Does a project, it's a channel on YouTube called Virtual Legality. And he's a lawyer that basically takes a look at legal stuff within, takes a look at the legal side of video games a lot of time, or the entertainment industry in general. And he put up today, he has a really fast turnaround time too. Like this morning already, he put out a video, 45 minutes, looking through the Activision Blizzard acquisition announcements from Microsoft, what that actually means, and then looked at antitrust law to see where would they maybe have problems. To summarize what he sort of said, the biggest area he thinks there might be an issue is if the FTC views Game Pass and game subscription services as being a separate industry. And if they view that as being a new emerging industry out of the video game market, buying Activision Blizzard is going to be anti-competitive from a Game Pass perspective. And that could then, if it's viewed that way, that could possibly end up holding this up. Or they're going to have to put in stipulations that they won't be able to have Activision Blizzard games or certain Activision Blizzard games exclusively on Game Pass. They'd have to allow it to be on other game subscription services, possibly. That was the biggest thing that he thought would be antitrust. And the biggest reasons otherwise why it wasn't going to be antitrust is that even with acquiring Activision Blizzard, Microsoft is not the largest. They're still behind Tencent and PlayStation from a revenue standpoint in the video game industry. So in that sense, that definitely is not anti-competitive. But if you break out Game Pass and game subscription services being a separate industry, that would be anti-competitive. And so it will be interesting to see what comes from that. And some of that might also be if Sony does announce Spartacus or whatever its actual name is going to be called. If they announce that anytime soon, that could actually play a factor in that. Because then they are an actual... That might make it into an industry if there is a competitor, finally. And so, yeah, so that's some of the interesting aspects of the antitrust arguments of it. But it was like a 47-minute video. I highly recommend you all watch it if you're interested in that side of this. But yeah, I don't know. Those are my thoughts. I've put off playing Final Fantasy Tactics for a lot longer than I expected, so I apologize for that. This is just fascinating to me. And I mean, I don't know. I'm a very, I really get into this stuff, as you probably could tell. And so I do have friends that are interested a little bit in, they're interested in video games, a little bit interested in the industry, but not necessarily interested to the point of letting me talk to them for an hour about this stuff. So the fact that you guys are here just listening, even if you didn't give a squat, I appreciate it, because it's good to have the outlet.